United Kingdom Hacker Gary McKinnon by Peter Nguyen. This presentation is for the Notre Dame Engineering Ethics class, EG 44175. In this presentation, I will go over who Gary McKinnon is, what happened, the major stakeholders, the various ethical and professional issues, the outcome, and finally, my opinion. Gary McKinnon was born on February 10th, 1966. He worked as a Scottish systems administrator and hacker and developed computer programs. After he committed his crime, 3 experts diagnosed him with Asperger's syndrome and clinical depression. Between February 2001 and March 2002, McKinnon hacked into 97 United States Army, Navy, and NASA computers. After this happened, it was dubbed as being the biggest military computer hack of all time. McKinnon stole 950 passwords and used the alias Solo to conceal his identity. When asked as to what his motivation behind the hacking was, McKinnon responded by saying that he had a curiosity for UFO activity and believed that the United States military computer system contained records of this activity. Also, in an interview, McKinnon criticized U.S. computer firewalls by saying that their security was crap. McKinnon used his girlfriend's aunt's house in London as a base for his hacking, but he was caught in 2002 when he tried to download a black and white photo off of NASA's website. He used his own personal email to download the pictures and even made no attempt to change his IP address on his computer, so authorities easily tracked him down. In the end, McKinnon caused $700,000 in damages. He deleted many critical files that led to a near-complete shutdown of the U.S. Army's Washington network. When asked as to how he accomplished the hacking, McKinnon said that it was not a difficult task at all. Apparently, many government officials left their default passwords in place, even after the September 11th terrorist attacks. The major stakeholders in this dilemma are Gary McKinnon, the United Kingdom judicial system, because they have to figure out how to prosecute McKinnon, the United States military, and future hackers, since how the United Kingdom judicial system decides to handle McKinnon's prosecution could set a precedent for other hackers. The legal issues involved in this case are many, one of which being that he caused damages of over $700,000, the fact that the hacking could be seen as a possible terrorism attempt, and that to prosecute McKinnon in the U.S., he would have to be extradited, which means that the United Kingdom would have to transfer McKinnon over to the U.S. An ethical issue involves the question of whether or not extraditing McKinnon is the right thing to do because his clinical depression leads him to having a high risk of committing suicide. A professional issue in the case comprises of McKinnon trespassing on U.S. military computer property. Even though he didn't physically trespass upon U.S. soil, his presence in the U.S. computer system provides for reason for trespassing. Socially, those in the United Kingdom in favor of blocking McKinnon's extradition order started up a group known as Free Gary McKinnon. In the U.S., the military prosecutors wanted him to be extradited in order to fully prosecute him. Because of this, there was developing tension between those in favor and those who oppose his extradition. When looking at the McKinnon situation, there are 2 groups that stand out. The first encompasses those that are in favor of his extradition and those against it. Furthermore, it is possible to put the majority of Americans in the first category and British citizens in the second. These 3 explanations for extradition fall in line with professional, legal, and ethical reasons respectively. The first reason is that even though McKinnon was physically in Great Britain when the hacking occurred, the real damage was done in the United States on military computers. Here's an analogy. Suppose someone is standing on the border between Mexico and the United States, but on the Mexican side. He shoots someone and severely injures them. It would be more reasonable to try the shooter in the United States than in Mexico, because the crime happened in the US and the crime is also very serious. The second reason for McKinnon's extradition is that the United States and Great Britain signed an extradition treaty in 2003, known as the Extradition Act of 2003. Because of this agreement, Great Britain is legally required to extradite any United Kingdom citizen whenever the United States requests it for crimes they believe to have been committed against them. The third reason is that although McKinnon may have not intentionally meant harm against the U.S., his crime was serious and cost the U.S. a lot of money, so he is still morally responsible to own up to his actions and should receive some punishment for them. For those who oppose extradition and want to keep McKinnon in the UK, their biggest reason comes from the Natural Human Rights Act. They believe that in the case that he were to be extradited, his Asperger's syndrome and clinical depression would lead him to commit suicide. This, in combination with the Human Rights Act, would be enough to block the extradition because his life would be placed at a high risk. Another reason is that if he were to be convicted, he would have to spend up to 60 years in a maximum security prison in the United States due to the severity of his crimes. This thought alone is stressful and terrifying enough to drive McKinnon to thoughts of suicide, because he would be far away from his family and he would be placed in a prison with others whose crimes are equal to or greater in severity than his crime. One more reason against his extradition is that he would not receive a fair trial in the U.S. This is because there is the notion that he would be punished more severely because he had contested the extradition process. The final argument against extradition is that since he did not try to hide his identity in the case of using his actual email and not changing his original IP address, he had no malicious intent while hacking. In the end, McKinnon wasn't extradited because the extradition would lead to a high risk of suicide and infringe upon his human rights. Also, he wasn't prosecuted in the UK or the US because UK prosecution would be difficult due to the majority of the evidence being in the United States. Simply stated, I believe that McKinnon should have been extradited. One of the biggest concerns with extraditing him was the fear of him committing suicide. However, the medical care that the United States offers seems to be overlooked. The U.S. has one of the best medical systems in the world, and doctors are more than qualified to adapt to whatever needs McKinnon presents, and they will be able to take care of him, whether through counseling or medication. Also, the U.S. and the United Kingdom signed the Extradition Treaty of 2003, which set grounds for extradition whenever the U.S. deemed it was necessary. So, by making exceptions, this may possibly open the door for future interpretations and disruptions in the treaty. Countries can make exceptions for different circumstances based upon each individual, and therefore more arguments will occur because of it. Finally, although McKinnon did not mean to cause havoc, his crimes were nonetheless serious and he did cause a substantial amount in damages. Therefore, he should take responsibility for his crimes and face punishment that is proportional to his intent, the severity of the crime, and his personal and apparent ailing health. So, maybe instead of being locked up in a maximum security prison, he could be in a prison that would be more focused on his illness and that would try to accommodate him. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you all learned something new, and here are my sources if you would like to learn more about this ethical dilemma.